Hey everybody, this is Tracy here with another edition of A View from Tracy's Point, and we are here to get caught up on our friend Don Russell. And so if you haven't heard already, Don had two court cases coming up in the Southern District of New York and the Eastern District of New York. And so the case in the Southern District of New York took place last week, and Don was found guilty, and he will have his sentencing in November. But we will get into that in a moment, as well as what is going on with the Eastern District of New York case. So hold on, and I'll be right back. Okay, so before we get into Don's case in the Southern District of New York, if you follow me on Twitter, and I can't remember if I mentioned this in a video a couple of weeks ago, but basically Don in his, I know what it was. I did a video, full video on Don Russell in this Eastern District of New York case, and trying to tie it into the fact that, if you guys remember, after Mr. Kelly was sentenced, they decided to have some type of reparations hearing in September because there was some question about some music that was sold, some publishing that was sold and netted $5 million, and they needed to talk about where that $5 million went and how much money he actually has so that he can pay reparations to these fake victims that landed this man with a 30-year sentence. And if you guys recall, right after Mr. Kelly it was either right after he was found guilty at the end of his case, or it might have been in the beginning of his case, there was a news story that came out saying that he had tried to sell some of his publishing, but nobody, was taking the bait. Nobody wanted to buy the publishing, and they interviewed this guy who is with one of these companies. So the thing now is, how we're always late to the party. So we're always hopping on. People need to get their masters. Need to get their masters. And so while black people are just now figuring out how to get their masters back from the record label, the white artists already know that the masters ain't worth anything in the long run. So they are selling their masters at this point, and selling their publishing. And so there was an article that came out about Mr. Kelly's publishing, and he was trying to sell the publishing, but nobody would buy it because of the case and the nature of the case. And they said that basically the music was worth nothing at this point. And they talked to this guy with this company. He's like one of these investors that are going around buying up the masters and the publishing from these big time artists and paying like astronomical amounts for this music, because they recognize that the only way you can make money off this music right now and the way that things are going is that the person either has to pass away, or you're able to sell the music to like movie production companies, and they can use the music like in their movies, or just sell the rights to the movies, like one-time rights to the music. And so they know that, with streaming and everything, that's really the only profitable way that they can make money. So in any event, they said that nobody bought this music. Well, now the government in the Eastern District of New York is saying that some of the music was sold and that it was sold for $5 million. And so I did this whole video about Don on the premise that Don must have sold that some of his music. And then you guys remember when the whole thing was going on about the music, he had possession of the music was stolen out of his van. But I never did publish the video because it was all speculation and it was just me, thinking outside the box and trying to figure all of this out. So I said, okay, I'm not going to post that video because I have no proof that anything that I'm saying is actual. And so I am not going to get into that. And anyway, so now the Eastern District of New York is saying that some of the music was sold and that it was sold for $5 million. And they're going to have this hearing in September to determine where this money went, who has the money. And then let me read this article real quick that came out back in August of last year to refresh your memory. And I think I did do a video on this, but let me go ahead and read this to you. It says, R. Kelly is reportedly in desperate need of money and is looking to sell his entire catalog for below market value just to make ends meet. And we know that this is not true because he doesn't have his catalog to be trying to sell to anybody. So this had to be music that was unpublished and that Sony and Universal Publishing has no rights to, that he is trying to sell, unless it's music that he wrote for other people, and part of their negotiation and contract is that he still owned the rights to that music. And so it says, earlier this month, R. Kelly's lawyer, Devereaux Canick, revealed that the singer's funds are depleted at a court hearing requesting free trial transcripts for his client. According to Billboard, Kelly's catalog generates about $1.7 million a year in the United States, but only a small portion of this amount actually hits Kelly's account. This, in addition to his ongoing criminal cases and civil battles, leaves the singer strapped for cash. Although Kelly is responsible for several global smashes, the value of his music catalog has plummeted in recent years. The trial and his alleged crimes has turned people away from his music, making the Mute R. Kelly campaign a successful initiative, which we know is a lie because his music is doing well. Okay, people are streaming his music even more now that he has been found guilty than they were before, but people were always streaming his music. So it says, unfortunately for the singer, it doesn't seem like things will be turning in his favor anytime soon. His trial for criminal conspiracy, blah, 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 began last week. And then they talk about some of the other cases. It says it has been offered. Okay, so this is the guy they were talking to. It says, it has been offered to me a number of times by his team, and of course, I've said no for the obvious reasons, said Mercariadis of Hypnosis Songs Fund founder and CEO of the Family Music Limited. There are incredible songs in that catalog, he adds, but why would you take that kind of risk? And so every article that I read about them trying to sell this said that there were no buyers, no takers, that nobody wanted to invest in this music. And now we find out that apparently somebody paid $5 million for the catalog or for whatever was being sold. And so I was like, okay, so did Don sell the music? Or did Keith sell the music? Like, who sold the music and got this $5 million? And then what happened with the $5 million? And so I was trying to tie Don into that, but then I said, just scrap it. I'm not going to do that. So Don has a hearing tomorrow in the Eastern District of New York. And if you follow me on Twitter, you know I shared this last week when his trial was going on. I said Don is in plea negotiations in the Eastern District of New York, and if Don is found guilty in the Southern District of New York, guarantee he is going to take that plea deal. And there will be only two reasons why he would do the plea deal. One is so that he doesn't go on trial and implicate Mr. Kelly any further, that his actions have already implicated him, or because they know that Don sold that music and he wants to save his behind. And don't quote me on that because I don't know. I was just speculating why he would take a plea deal. So Don has a hearing tomorrow, but the hearing is closed to the public. Now we know that this is Ann Donnelly and she does things differently than any other court, but typically when a person is taking a plea deal and they're just pleading guilty, then they'll have a call-in number where you can listen, because remember we were able to listen to the Michael Williams, doing the plea deal. We were able to listen to Richard Arline doing the plea deal. But for some reason, there doesn't appear to be a call-in number to hear Don talk about taking this plea deal, which makes me feel that Don is about to say something that they don't want nobody else to know. And we would just have to wait and see what that something is. I'm not going to speculate on what it is, but that hearing is taking tomorrow at 4 p.m. So let's move over to the Southern District of New York. Now, this case, Don was facing 2 charges. One was conspiracy, and then the other one was calling in a threat to this theater that was hosting Surviving Lies, a premiere of Surviving Lies, a viewing party for Surviving Lies. And this case, when I tell y'all jury selection was longer than the actual trial was, I think it took 2 days to pick a jury, and it took a day and a half for them to complete the trial and for the jury to find Don guilty of calling in the threat. But then the jury was so confused as to why Cash Jones was not up there. Like, even if Cash Jones gave information to the government, saying that Don, well, we know that she told them that Don was the one that called the bomb threat. We already know. And then it wasn't even, when we got the trial, it wasn't even the bomb threat. It was that somebody had a gun. So they don't even know what happened. But anyway, Cash was the one that gave them the information to implicate Don, but she didn't testify. And, and that's sort of like what they're going to try and do in the Northern District of Illinois. They're going to use these statements from all these different people that are dead and gone on to glory, and they are going to present that information to the jury, but those people may or may not testify. Like Lisa Van Allen, the 2 guys out of Kansas. We know that the private investigator is deceased, but they can basically get up there and read whatever statements they gave back in 2008 and never take the stand, and then the Jennifer Bonji won't be able to cross-examine them. And so they got up there and said what Cash Jones said, and then they took an interview that Don did with somebody, the guy that I was following, Matthew Russell with Inner City Press. He was trying to get exhibits, and he never did get the exhibits, and then he never would say who, because they played a YouTube interview, and we know that Don has been on Dubowski's channel, Texas Black Diamond's channel, Nikki at Night's channel. He's been on Unwind with Tasha K, so it could have been any of those interviews that he did. But basically, whatever interview that they played, Don acknowledged that he was calling the Newhouse Theater. I think that was the name of the theater. He was calling there all day long, trying to do a cease and desist, which we all know that a cease and desist is something that is in writing, that is served, on a person, that you don't call a person and say, I'm issuing a cease and desist, that you cannot show this, that you're infringing on Mr. Kelly's property and his copyright. So that was stupid to begin with. And then Don was calling from his phones that are registered in his name, private phones, his mama phone, everybody else's phone, calling Cash Jones on her phone, sending text messages. He was calling the Newhouse Theater. He was calling the fire stations and the police stations and all this stuff, trying to stop this viewing from taking place. And so they convicted him on calling in the threat, even though they never played the recording of the threat in court. And they had this guy who was working that day and answering the phones, and evidently he's a drug addict, but he says that he wasn't on drugs that particular night. So then he turned around and said that the person that was calling, saying that they were Mr. Kelly's manager and representing him, and that they couldn't go through with the viewing because of the copyright infringement, he sounded like a lawyer. He had a very professional voice, but the person that called in the gun threat sounded like he was from Brooklyn, like he was a street person. And then the Matthew Russell said the way he was trying to describe it was like the person sounded like a thug, right? And so my thought was, okay, we know Cash Jones was in New York, and we know that she had her cousin, Michael Williams, the one that's now serving 8 years for setting Angelo's car on fire. So we know that he was there. Now, this was my thing. If Don was in Chicago calling, making these phone calls, when did Don get to New York? Because remember when the Eastern District of New York case is about them threatening Faith Rogers and her mother. And remember, it came out that they were in Don's paperwork. Don and the Michael Williams and Cash Jones had met Faith and her mom at a restaurant in New York to try to get Faith, I guess, to drop the lawsuit. So in the trial, they said Don was in Chicago and he was making these phone calls. So it sounds to me like they don't have all their information together, but in any event, they found Don guilty of calling in this threat, but they did not find him guilty of the conspiracy because they couldn't understand why Cash Jones wasn't there to testify and why Cash Jones wasn't charged as part of the conspiracy, because how do you have a conspiracy with just one person? So we needed this jury from the Southern District of New York to have been over there in that Eastern District of New York case for Mr. Kelly, because then they would have been sitting there, and a lot of the jurors were either lawyers, worked in public safety, or were married to or knew people that worked in law or law enforcement. And so this was a pretty smart jury. And I believe that if they had been on that Eastern District of New York case, they would have found Mr. Kelly innocent, because they would have been sitting there saying, well, how can you have a RICO, but you only got one person up here? Where is the enterprise? We need these other people that were part of the enterprise. So this jury was thinking, and they was like, okay, this ain't adding up. This isn't making sense. And they basically found Don guilty because he admitted that he had been calling the Newhouse Theater all day long trying to stop the airing of Surviving Lives. So by reason, they're saying that, okay, well, if he was calling all day, then more than likely he is the person that made the phone call. But I'm thinking that it was Michael Williams, that Cash Jones got Michael Williams to make that phone call. And now she done threw Don under the bus and told the feds that Don was the one that made the phone call. So that came out, and that is how they found him guilty. So I just think it is going to be very interesting to see what happens tomorrow in this plea hearing. I think it was about a month ago. Oh, I might have mentioned it when I told you guys that Don had hired the Michael Friedman guy as his attorney, and Michael Friedman was the one. They had to do a Curcio hearing in the Eastern District of New York because Michael Friedman was supposed to represent Mr. Kelly, but Mr. Kelly never sent him the money. And so he terminated the contract between them. And then I don't know if I mentioned this to you guys in that same video or if it was in the video that I decided not to post. But it turns out that when Jennifer Bongine represented Mr. Cosby in California recently, that it was actually the Michael Friedman guy whose credentials that they used in order for her to represent Mr. Kelly in California, because she's not licensed to practice law in California. So I thought that was very, very interesting. So anyway, I was going to read you guys Matthew Russell's take on the trial, But I just summed it up for you because, like I said, the trial wasn't that long. Don is still out on bail, which I think is kind of sketchy. That, first of all, that he was allowed to be out on bail this entire time since he was indicted, especially if they're trying to put the pressure on him to turn on Mr. Kelly and give them some information to harm Mr. Kelly. But I guess they thought he would do more damage being out of jail than he would have done being in jail. And I guess they were right, because it was the interview that he did on YouTube that kind of sealed the deal, where he admitted he had been calling the Newhouse Theater all day long, and that made the jury say, okay, yeah, he guilty. He made that phone call, even if the voices were different, and even though they didn't play the video for us. So Don, I don't know, but it is going to be interesting, because if whatever his plea deal is, if it is sealed after this hearing tomorrow, then y'all know Don is up to no good. But if they go ahead and post it on Pacer, I will definitely download it and read it for you. And so that's it. Latest update on Don Russell, found guilty in the Southern District of New York. His sentencing, I believe, is November 10th. And he is out free on bond, free to travel, free to do whatever he wants to do, go wherever he wants to go, I guess, back to Chicago. And there will be no trial in the Eastern District of New York, because he is supposed to plead guilty tomorrow. Don't know if he's just pleading guilty because he knows the case isn't winnable and he doesn't want to say anything to implicate Mr. Kelly, or if he's about to give some tea and tell where that $5 million went. And y'all know that's just me speculating, so don't be running around here saying Don sold the man music and got $5 million for it. Please don't do that. That's just me saying Don up to no good. But anyway, maybe he has some information that they can use to further harm Mr. Kelly. I don't know, but we shall find out soon. So that's it for me. Go ahead, leave your comments below, rate the video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And until the next time, I shall talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.